Spitfire and the pilots who flew them have been the inspiration for authors, filmmakers, video games and artists for generations. Now, I was bought the Young's miniature sculpt of a 1/10 scale RAF Spitfire Mk1 pilot years ago. Now this has been sitting in my stash ever since, but maybe it's now time to create my own take on this beautiful sculpt. Now, looking at the history of this sculpt. Now the Mk1 Spitfire entered service just before the start of World War II in 1938, and it was well in service for things like the evacuation of Dunkirk. It also served through the whole of the Battle of Britain. In fact, the majority of Spitfires that served during the Battle of Britain were all Mk1s, even though the upgraded version of the Mark II was just starting to enter service towards the end of the summer of 1940. Therefore, the story I want to tell with this is that of one of these young pilots right at the very start of the war. So this means we can have some fun looking at the kit and the colours of that time period. But it'll also be interesting to have a look at how accurate is this bust to the historical kit that was used. Now, as is pretty standard with Young's miniatures, the detail on this thing is beautiful. And all the sub-assemblies went together really easily before being primed in Tamiya surface primer. Now looking at this bust, there's a lot going on, and with the principle of if you can see the detail then you can paint it. So first of all I'm going to put a base coat down of Tamiya Sea Blue, and then go over that with the zenithal highlights of Tamiya Deck Tan to kind of bring out that detail and allow me to see it a lot easier. So right, let's play with some paint, shall we? Now this is going to be the first controversial bit. Now believe it or not, the actual colour of a wartime Mk1 Spitfire can keep a scale modelling forum busy and chatting away for ages. So I'm going to try and mix it myself and get it as close as I can to the reference photos and videos of the Mk1 Spit from the Royal Air Force Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. Now this plate here, this would have formed part of the seat. The seat in the Spitfire had a bucket in the base, so kind of a dip, which the pilot's parachute would slot into and form the seat cushion for the pilot to sit on. The padding in the backrest and on the headrest would have been black leather, especially in the Mk1. I believe later on it was then changed to a more of a reddy brown colour. Yes, I know this is going to be pretty much completely covered up by the shadow of the pilot itself, but hey, I'm doing this for fun. Now looking at the torso, there's a lot going on here. First of all, we have the standard issue aircrew roll neck sweater, which is a kind of a creamy white colour. Then we have the sheepskin lined flying jacket with the Mae West life jacket over the top of that. Then we have the parachute harness with the seat harness over the top of that. Now I will do a more detailed tutorial for this later, but the wool of the jacket lining and of the sweater, I don't want to paint it pure white, so I'm going to start with kind of an orangey creamy colour and then build it up from that. The actual leather of the jacket was great fun, and it did take me quite a long time to build it all up. Once again, tutorial to follow at a later date. But building up the patina in the leather, from base coats to blending and then stippling and also with some glazing, is a really satisfying process. Now to start on the Mae West as well as the parachute. Now I started this off with kind of a sandy, canvassy kind of colour, but something didn't look right, it wasn't clicking right. So I did a bit more digging online to find some more reference photos. Now what that showed was that this part here is not actually part of the parachute harness. It's actually part of the old Mae West life jacket. Now an interesting point on this is that the Mae West life jacket that you often see bright yellow when it's been painted in art or even recreations, that's not the colour it actually was originally. Originally at the start of the war it was this kind of sandy, kind of canvassy colour. And unfortunately after several pilots landed in the Channel, the pilots themselves started painting them yellow to make them more visible when they're in the water. So as we're going for the early war period, let's go and stick with that sandy, canvassy kind of colour. Now the difference in colours between the Mae West and the canvas backing of the parachute is that yes, the Mae West is kind of that canvassy kind of colour, whereas the parachute harness had more of a green fabric backing with an off-white strap of the harness. Whereas a seat harness, which kind of physically attached the pilots to the aircraft, so that would have been a much darker orangey kind of colour. Now at the minute the metalwork is looking very clean and shiny, So let's age that a little bit using a little bit of AK Interactive Streak and Grime. Just a little bit to take that sheen off a little bit and add a bit of depth and character to the metal. Now moving on to the head of the Pilot, this is where things get a little bit more tricky as you try and build in those skin tones. But also there's a lot of leather and a little more leather effects to go in here as well. Now this is a different leather to that of the jacket, but I'm going to start off the same way with a base coat of chocolate brown and build up the patina and then darken that later on. But also the reason I'm doing this is once I've got the skin tones in, I don't want to then try and get back in there to paint the brown of the helmet. So I'm going to start that first and then go in and do the skin tones. Now this is the dodgy bit when you're painting leather, because you're building in those ultra highlights that will then build up the patina. But at the minute it looks absolutely terrible. But you do have to trust the process, and we'll get there in a minute. So now I've got the basic patina. I've made the highlights a bit extra bold in this, because I'm now going to darken that leather down. Now the leather of the flying helmet was quite a dark brown, almost black leather. So therefore I'm going to now use a glaze of a very, very almost black dark brown and kind of build up the shadows and slowly creep into those highlighted areas and blend those in a little bit, all with the glazes. So therefore the shadows will be extra dark and then I kind of build up, but you're still seeing those undertones, the browns of the lighter leather, the patina kind of coming through that darker black glaze. Now this will take multiple layers, and to be honest with you, this bit took me absolutely ages, but we will get there. Whilst there's quite a lot of character and the patina in there, it is looking very brown. Now I have seen some reference photos where either side of the zip, which goes into the earpieces on the side of the helmet, they almost look like a red band. So I'm going to replicate that with a little bit of scale 75 shrapnel red. Now for the skin tones of the face, I'm going to do a more detailed tutorial later. I want to start with a base coat of acrylic and then build it all up with oils. It is quite challenging and takes lots of going back and forth to kind of get it right. This bit is really satisfying and I'm really growing to enjoy this bit. So we're starting to get somewhere now. I'm really pleased with how the harness on the back has come out. It's a shame that majority of it is going to be covered up by the seat one in the final piece, but we will know it's there. Now as always, eyes are the really tricky bit to paint, so I'm going to break out a new toy to help me with this. Now the trick I've found when it comes to painting eyes is that the white of the eye is not white. So I want to do it much more kind of a very light blue grey. Then painting the top half of the eyeball with a darker glaze to create the shadow of the eyelid. Now this makes it look more realistic and helps to reduce the effect of the big white glowy eye effect. Now once I've done that, I'm going to give this guy green eyes. So I'm going to use the mix of the colour that I want to use, but also then be really careful and try and get the angles right so he's looking in the right direction rather than being straight ahead, but also to make sure they both are looking the same direction. Then once I've done that, I'm going to go around the edges of that with a very, very dark brown around the edges of the outside of the iris, the outside of the colour part of the eye, and then use a black for the pupil in the centre. Once done that, and I'm happy with that, I've got tidied it up, that I can then go in with a pure white and add little reflections into the eyeball itself. Now a trick I found recently, I'm going to share with you, is to, yes, put the little white dot in the black of the eye, the pupil of the eye, but then also give a highlight on the white of the eye as well. That gives it a really nice effect. So far he's looking pretty good, but now to add a bit more detail. Now we have the oxygen mask, which also held the microphone for his radio. But also in his helmet as well, the big bits on the side were the earpieces for his radio, so you can hear what's kind of going on, as well as dampen the sound of having a massive Merlin engine a few feet in front of you. You do get the cables that come through with the kit, but I'm going to swap them out. Now there's two kind of cables coming out of the oxygen mask. One is the big oxygen hose, and then one is a smaller piece which goes to the radio mic in the front. For the oxygen hose, I'm going to use a piece of copper wire. I'm going to bend that into place and then glue that in. Now for the radio wires, off of the earpieces and also off the microphone in the oxygen mask, rather than wire, I'm going to use guitar string. A, because it's got a really nice colour to it already, but also because it's a really nice detail of the coiled wire through that guitar string. And for those, it's simply a case of cutting them to length and then super gluing them into some pre-drilled holes in both in the earpieces and in the mask. Now, having bent the copper wire that will form the oxygen tube into the shape I want, I then base coated that. Now, I'm not going to use black because it's too dark, too stark, so I actually used Tamiya Sea Blue, and that worked out really nicely. Now, the patterning on this tube is a weave of little yellow dashes all around the whole thing. Now, doing it technically is not difficult. It's just a case of getting a very fine brush, the yellow, and just little dabs of paint all the way around in the right pattern. The difficult bit is to maintain that pattern nice and evenly spaced without getting bored and trying to rush it, which then means they go all out and it doesn't look right. But taking your time with this is well worth the effort. And once that's done, it's a case of really carefully super gluing the mask into where it will clip into the flying helmet, having it draping over the side. And then gathering up those wires and then just whipping them together with a little bit of cotton just to tidy them all up. Now, being honest, one of the downsides, one of my pet hates when it comes to these models, is trying to get hold of them in the first place. Now, if you go on most of the major selling sites, then you'll be swamped with tons of recasts. Finding the genuine article can be quite tricky, as the listings can be absolutely identical recasts or the originals. But the sculpts on these models are absolutely beautiful, and it is a case of credit where credit is due. So I actually went to Young's Miniatures and asked them for a list of their distributors. So I'll put links to some of those distributors down in the description in the resource list for this project. Now, I've had loads of fun with this and I learned so much doing this bust. Now, if you did enjoy this and or learn something new, then please hit the like button, tell the YouTube algorithm that this is a video worth watching and worth sharing with other people. And likewise, if you want to see more content like this, then please make sure you've hit that subscribe button. The next project or kit review should be appearing about now, and I'll see you there.